have a lot going on here. Welcome to the Emerald Ash Borer Invasion virtual field trip. This is going to be worth the wait, trust me. My name is Kathy, and I'm here at the Chicago Botanic Garden, and I'm here with several colleagues. In the lab, I have Emily and Tom. Out in the woods later, you will meet Cindy, Sean, Mike, Jim, and you'll actually meet my daughters who are in 6th grade, Mimi and Michelle. They got out of school today to join us for this broadcast. For the next hour, my colleagues and I are going to share a real-world problem in ecology with you, and we think this is very important for you to know about. And we hope that this will also help you understand ecology a little better. Let's begin. This story is called Nightmare on Ash Street. This is a story about a place called Harmony Woods. Now, Harmony Woods is a balanced ecosystem. You are probably already studying this in school. So plants take energy from the sun, and they make sugars, and they make fresh leaves. And some animals eat those leaves or the seeds that the plants make. Those animals are called consumers. And then there are larger animals that eat the smaller animals. When these organisms die, the plants or the animals, there are decomposers that recycle the nutrients and put them back in the soil. And all of this is happening in Harmony Woods. If we look at an example of a food chain in Harmony Woods, we have an owl that has eaten a mouse, and the mouse has eaten a seed from the plant. And once again, when these things die, they return to the soil and they provide fresh nutrients for the plants. The population of plants and animals still stays relatively the same, and it stays that way for hundreds and hundreds of years. Now, on the other side of the world, in China, there's a woods that's very similar to ours, and it's called Chinese Harmony Woods. And although it is just like ours, it just has different species, and there are food chains and food webs and interrelationships there that keep it in balance and sustainable for hundreds of years. One of the small insects that lives in our Chinese Harmony Woods is called the emerald ash borer. Now, this is a kind of a beetle. It got its name because it's green, that's an emerald color, and it bores holes in ash trees, so it's an ash borer. Do you get it? Ash trees are the only kind of trees that it eats. Now, in Harmony Woods, it doesn't even eat all of the ash trees, because some of the ash trees in the Chinese Harmony Woods taste bad and even make the borer sick. So the other problem is, the other thing for the ash borer is that in China there are wasps and there are other predators that kind of control the population of the emerald ash borer. It can't move around very easily and get from tree to tree. So it's a tough place, but everything is in balance, and it grows pretty well. Now, here's where the story gets kind of complicated. In 2002, some Chinese manufacturing companies needed wooden crates to send their goods to the United States. So they went into Chinese Harmony Woods, and they cut down some ash trees, and they made the crates out of wooden boxes. Then they shipped their products across the ocean, and they didn't realize that the ash wood was full of living ash borer larvae, all minding their own business, marching the wood. Now, here's where I say, oops, and you say, uh-oh, that's right. Okay, that's our first oops. The crates were unloaded at a port in Detroit, Michigan, and the boards were probably all put in a pile. Let's see, they're unloaded. Here they are, they're being unloaded. Now we got our picture back. They were probably thrown in a pile, and some of the boards are probably carried off and reused as firewood somewhere. And so out hatched the beetles that showed up in a new world. Here they were in this great place called Michigan. And guess what? When they came out, there were any wasps around waiting for them. So they could fly free from tree to tree. And they found an ash tree. And the ash tree tasted wonderful. And here was the thing. All the ash trees tasted great. So guess what they did? What would you do if you went into a candy store and there was no adult telling you not to eat? What would you do? You would eat everything in sight. So that's what they did. They ate, and they ate, and they ate, and they grew in numbers, and they had more babies, and there were more emerald ash borers, and more, and they spread. Woohoo! Okay, now we have to back up a little bit. In the suburbs of Michigan, people wanted to have tree-lined streets. They wanted streets that looked like, you know, almost like a forest. And because they wanted to do this, they planted a lot of ash trees. Ash trees were inexpensive and easy to plant and grow in their yards. And so in some places, 1 in 5 of the trees they put along the streets were ash trees. Here we go. Oops. And you say, uh-oh. You know what's coming. So after 2002, the people who lived in these neighborhoods started to notice that there was a problem with their ash trees. You can see it in this picture here. The tree on the right side is dead. As you move towards the screen, you can see the trees on the right are not as healthy as the one on the left. And this is the beetle moving from tree to tree, feeding on the ash tree. Now, as this happened, they had these trees in their yard, and they cut them down, and they probably sold them for firewood or spread them out, and they probably shared them with other people in their state. And you know what they did? They moved the larvae from around their neighborhood to other places. Oops. And what do you say? Uh-oh. And then they took some of that wood and they put it in trucks and they shipped it out to other states. Oops. And you say, uh-oh, because you know what's happening here. As the beetle spread, there came a point when there was 6 million trees infested with the beetle. And at this point, they finally figured out what was causing all the ash trees to die. But by this time, the beetle had become so large in numbers that it was virtually unstoppable. So, by now, we've learned a little bit more about the beetle. It's kind of important to understand, first of all, that it is a beetle, and like a butterfly, it has a life cycle. The life cycle starts as an egg, and then it hatches and is a larva that's teeny tiny, and it's an eating machine. It eats and eats and eats and grows, and then it goes through a dormant pupal stage, kind of like the cocoon of a butterfly, and then it hatches and becomes an adult where it flies off and lays its eggs in another tree. When the larvae are on the tree, it eats the bark it eats just under the layer of the bark and eats and spreads, and then emerges out of a D-shaped hole in the tree. When it emerges, then it flies off and spreads its eggs. It leaves us with only a couple of options of what we could do to manage the beetle. So now, the story does not have a happy ending. The problem that we're telling you about today is that the beetle is flying all over the country, and it is going to spread everywhere, and it's probably going to come to a neighborhood like you. So today in our virtual field trip, we're now going to show you what the beetle looks like, and we're going to show you how it's moving and what you can do when it reaches your area. But first, we want to show you the areas in the Midwest where it has spread, and to do that I have Emily, who is a scientist in our lab, in our GIS lab, and she'll tell you a little bit about what she does and how she studies the beetle.
Cool. Thanks, Kathy. So my name's Emily Yates, and I work as a conservation scientist here at the Chicago Botanic Garden. And one of my specialties is something called GIS, and GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems. And so basically GIS is using a computer to make maps. And we have big, giant spatial databases where we have lots of data points that are linked to specific locations on the globe, and we use different data layers like temperature, precipitation, species distributions like of the emerald ash borer to make maps. And so I want to show you a couple different maps today looking at the emerald ash borer, and I have one map that we want to pull up now that talks about the spread of the emerald ash borer. And so GIS and geography are really powerful tools for looking at different conditions and changes in the environment. And so they're very useful for looking at invasive species like the emerald ash borer. And with geospatial technology, like GIS map making, we have kind of a rule of thumb that we like to say, and it's that the location of anything is becoming everything. And so by using maps to visualize the locations of the emerald ash borer, we can examine potential solutions to environmental problems like these. So Kathy talked previously about how the emerald ash borer got into the United States, but looking at this map, you could kind of see more closely that the red dots are where an emerald ash borer has been spotted. And then the green area on the map is the approximate range of ash trees, which are the hosts for the emerald ash borer. And so you can see that the emerald ash borer is spread all over the northeastern states right now. And it started in Detroit and then is now as far west as Colorado and then as far south as Georgia. And so the total area of all the counties where emerald ash borer is present is over 600,000 square kilometers. So that's a huge, huge area. And you can see that it's present in Virginia, it's present near Chicago, and it's also has potential to be present in Arizona as well, where some of you guys are located. So it doesn't necessarily spread slowly or evenly. And although this map doesn't show it, the emerald ash borer has also been established in Canada as well. So it's recently been discovered close to us here at the Chicago Botanic Garden in Wilmette and Evanston. And then I have a second map that I'd like to pull up too that shows it's created by the Nature Conservancy's. It's been created by the Nature Conservancy's Global Invasive Species team, and it's more of a risk map that shows the risk of emerald ash borer and the risk that it's been introduced and that it will become established. And so in the map you can see that the darker red areas are the highest risk for emerald ash borer, and then going down to the green areas which have a lower risk. And you can see that the emerald ash borer really is attracted to urban areas, so near cities. And it also, the risk of emerald ash borer becoming established is defined primarily by the presence of ash trees, because they're the hosts for this insect, and then the proximity of these ash trees to natural forests and close to ports of entry for the wood that is contaminated with emerald ash borer. So, of course, emerald ash borer is an invasive species, and we define invasive species as an organism, and this can be either an animal, a plant, a fungus, or even a microorganism. But an invasive species is usually not native to the area, and it's able to establish itself within plant communities and possibly do detrimental effects.
Now we've shown you where it is. One of the things Emily said that I think you should note is that the fact that it's more of a problem in urban areas goes back to that idea that I told you earlier about planting more ash trees than other kinds of trees. So it's the perfect place, perfect candy store for our emerald ash borer. Now we're going to show you the beetle. We're going to flip now to Tom, who's an insect expert.
Hey guys, my name's Tom Tiddens, and I'm supervisor of plant health care at the Chicago Botanic Garden. And I'm responsible for the health and well-being of all the plants, but I also wear some other hats. I'm actually the entomologist for the garden and the arborist for the garden. And an entomologist is someone who works with insects, so I'm very familiar with this critter, the emerald ash borer, and I'm also responsible for the care and well-being of all of our trees. So I've been asked to kind of talk to you guys all a little bit about the life cycle of the emerald ash borer, a little bit about how to identify them. And life cycle is similar. People have life cycles of 80+ years. Insects have life cycles that sometimes are as short as hours or days, but sometimes can be as long as 17 years, like the 17-year cicada. This insect, the emerald ash borer, has a really nice life cycle that is just one complete year, which really makes management kind of interesting. And with the life cycle of one complete year, we know exactly where it is at different times of year. Here's a picture of the emerald ash borer life cycle, and you can see on the left-hand side, in the summer it's out as an adult. It lays eggs, which is on top. Eggs hatch late summer, and then the eggs become a larva, and the larva will actually feed under the bark of the tree in the fall and somewhat through the winter months. And then in the springtime it'll pupate and emerge as an adult again. But we'll talk more about that. But let's go ahead and focus on the adult for a minute here. Okay, I've got this a little bit in the wrong order, guys. Okay, here's the adult. This is the adult emerald ash borer. It is actually a beetle, and it's a very pretty beetle. It's green metallic, about a ½ inch long. So if you put it on a penny, it'll cover about 3/4 of it. If you put it on a dime, it's just about that length exactly. A real pretty beetle. It emerges from under the bark of trees in about May, and will be out and active throughout the summer months. Its main purpose at this point is really mating and laying eggs. But notice on this leaf, you can see that the leaf is chewed. The adult emerald ash borer does do feeding and will do a lot of damage to leaves, but the damage really doesn't harm the tree at all, and most of the damage is way up high in the ash tree and really not noticeable. So this really isn't the damaging stage of the insect. But as an adult, it does have the ability to fly, and its natural range is, in nature, is about 1/2 mile to 1.5 miles. So that's not real far. So how does it jump around the country? Well, as Kathy had talked about, it's really through the movement of firewood and other materials, because it's natural movement. It's not a real strong flyer. So it's out in the summer as an adult, mating and laying eggs. It has the capability of laying anywhere from 60 to 90 eggs. And let's go ahead and look at a picture of the eggs. Here's an egg about 1/8 of an inch in size. Eggs are laid during mid to late summer. Once eggs are laid, they're actually laid on the trunk of the tree in different cracks and crevices. The egg will hatch within about a week's time, and the larva will become a very small larva. And here's a picture of a larva that's kind of in the mature stage. And in just a minute, guys, I'm going to show you a larva under the microscope that actually I went out and collected earlier today, because this is the stage that the insect is in right now. It's actually a larva under the bark. And this is really the stage that the insect does the most damage to the tree. So the adults are out, they lay their eggs, the eggs hatch, and these larvae, or we sometimes call them borers, will burrow just under the bark, and they will go through growth stages. They'll start out very tiny, about the size of that egg, and they'll grow all the way up to a little bit larger than 1 inch tall. In the process, they're actually feeding just under the bark in an area that we call the cambial area. And it's an area that has two different components. One is the phloem, which is responsible for nutrients flowing up and down the tree. Another one called the xylem, which conducts water up and down the tree. Both these areas are just under the bark, and this is where this little critter feeds. And in the process of feeding, he makes serpentine trails. And you can see a little picture of one of the trails. You actually see something that looks like sawdust in it, and that's actually called frass. And what he does is he burrows back and forth, and in the process he actually severs those conductive tissues of water and nutrients up the tree, and in essence is almost strangling the tree. So once this starts to happen, the top of the tree will start to die back, and that's one of the signs of emerald ash borers. So here's just a picture of one borer, but generally these guys are working in great numbers, and in an area of 1 square foot, we could have as many as 20 emerald ash borers working. So this is where they're at right now. They're feeding under the bark, and this is the stage that really does most of the damage. So he's going to actually overwinter in this stage. In the winter time, when it gets cold, he kind of ceases feeding, goes into kind of a period of kind of resting, and then in the springtime he will pupate. And sorry guys, I'm not working this really well. He will pupate and emerge as an adult. So on the right-hand side is an adult beetle as he would look right in springtime when he's ready to emerge. On the left side is one he's just in the process of transforming from that borer into the adult beetle. So the one on the right-hand side, he's ready to emerge, and this happens, emergence is anytime generally in May that they do their emergence, and he'll come out as an adult beetle and be ready to fly and mate immediately. And this emergence, like I say, starts in May, but can happen May, June, and July. Peak emergence is really in June. So I want to revisit the life cycle one more time real quick with you guys. So again, we're talking about a 1-year life cycle. So if I was to say, where is the emerald ash borer now, as we just talked about, well, he's a larva. He's under the bark. Where would I find him in June? Well, he would be an adult. Where would I find him in spring? Well, still under the bark, probably pupating. But it's a 1-year life cycle to complete all the way around. So really kind of neat. Let's go ahead now. Let's look under the microscope, and we're going to look at a larva that Actually, I went out and collected earlier today, and how'd I get this larva? Well, actually, I went out to a tree and took something called a draw knife, which is a big blade, and I scraped the bark off the tree, and underneath the tree I found a lot of galleries, and when we go outdoors in just a couple minutes, Cindy Baker will show you what a gallery looks like. It's basically they're feeding these serpentine feeding paths that are just under the bark. But here's a boar, and actually he is alive, but he's actually going into a kind of a resting period for winter, and again he'll pupate in the spring. But I'm going to give him just a little poke here, and on the front here is really where his mouth parts are, on the right-hand side there, and he's about an inch long. And he has bell-shaped segments, and about 10 bell-shaped segments. So again, I just got this guy this morning, and in an area of about 2 square feet, I was able to find about 20 of these guys. So all working together, making these serpentine galleries under the bark, they've done enough damage to actually start to cut off all the flow of nutrients and water up the tree, which is what causes the death of the tree that we're seeing. So that's really a little bit of description of what they look like and their life cycle, and I think it's really important to understand that. So I think we're going to go ahead and move on. And
yes, Tom, we have 2 questions. We have 2
okay,
questions.
We've got some questions here.
The first question, we probably already answered both of these, but one question is, does the emerald ash borer affect any other plants?
Does the emerald ash borer? No, it's really very specific to only ash trees, which is great. But we've got a number of different types of ash trees. We've got green ash, white ash, blue ash. All of them are susceptible to ash trees. And one thing interesting about this critter is other insects will attack stress trees. This insect will go after any ash tree, even ash trees that are in good health. So basically, they will go after any ash tree. So that's why
some pests just affect
some pests,
plants that are in distress.
Yeah. And other pests are very host specific. So this one, in a way, is host specific, whereas aphids or something would go after a lot of different things. So we're really only concerned about emerald ash borer on ash trees. That's why it's important to be able to identify what an ash tree is. And I think Cindy Baker in a little bit is going to talk about that. Another question?
Another question, and this will be the last, but this is a really good question. I don't know who this came from out there, but thank you. Does the thickness of the bark make a difference?
Does the thickness of the bark make a difference?
Or the age of the tree? That was the
no, not really. I didn't get a real good close-up of the mouth parts of the boar, but basically when that egg hatches and the egg is laid on the bark, the boar will burrow right in. It just may take him an extra couple minutes to get into the cambial zone, but thickness of bark really won't make a difference, and different species of ash have different thickness of bark, so we really haven't found that to really affect the movement at all, or the life cycle.
So now we're going to move to the woods, where Cindy's going to show us what the beetle looks like on the tree, the damage that it does on the bark. Here we go.
Good morning. My name is Cindy, and I'm a horticulturist here at the garden, and my student scientists are Mimi and Michelle, and we're out here in the woods, and this is 100 acres of beautiful natural woodlands, and we came out here because we were looking for some ash trees. So this morning, we've been looking around at lots of different leaves, and here's some of the leaves we found, but we did not find any of the, we didn't find any ash leaves. So I brought out a photo. Here we go. I'm going to get rid of my other ones. Okay, this is what the ash leaf will look like in the summertime. It's a compound leaf with an uneven number of leaflets, 5 to 9 leaflets. So you can see this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 leaflets. And this whole entire thing makes up one leaf, even though it looks like it's a bunch of little leaves. This is one leaf. So this is very indicative of the ash tree. So another way that we can identify the tree at this time of year, because we don't have any leaves on it, is we're looking at a branch from an ash tree, and you can see how the buds are opposite. So these 2 little branches came out opposite. And if we look up close, I'm not sure if you can focus in on that, you can see that even the buds at the very top are opposite. And then there's one coming out at the top. See, there they are. That is a very unusual branching pattern. So that would be one of your signs that this might be an ash tree. So another way, I'm going to reach down here and get a piece of bark for you to look at. This is a piece of bark from an ash tree, and it forms an unusual kind of, it looks kind of ropey to me, and it kind of forms these X's or some people will call them diamond shapes. Can you see those there? Okay, this would be another indication that you're looking at an ash tree. Now remember that Tom told you that the emerald ash borer will only attack ash trees. But there are about 8 billion ash trees in our nation, across our woodlands and our forests, and probably about 50% of the trees that are in our cities and along our streets and even in our yards are ash trees. So they're a very popular tree, and there's a lot of them out here. In our region here in northeastern Illinois, the most common ones are the green ash, the white ash, and the black ash. Okay, so now we're going to look at some of the indications of the emerald ash borer on an ash tree. So if we were to look way in the top of this tree, we would see that it had been dying back for a long time. I'm standing right next to an ash tree here. So that would be one of the first signs that Tom was talking about with you. Now we're going to go over here, and I'm going to ask my assistants if they can point out some of the D-shaped exit holes that the adults came out of.
They're tiny.
They are. Look how tiny those are. Can you
Hang
focus
on,
in on those?
We're looking for them.
Okay. All right. Can you see them? Maybe move your finger down just a little bit so they can see. Okay, now you probably can see some round holes. And as Tom told you, there are all sorts of other critters that will use the trees, that will feed on the trees, burrow into them, make trees their homes. But those insects are not harmful. The emerald ash borer, on the other hand, when they infest an ash tree, they are so many and they feed so heavily that they'll kill the tree. So let's look at another indication. I'm going to point to right here, and we'll have our camera come in. This is where a woodpecker, now they can hear the larva burrowing underneath the bark. They have really good hearing. So they will come in and they will strip the bark off, and then they'll drill down in there until they pull the worm out and eat it. Well, unfortunately, we don't have enough woodpeckers around here to take care of all the emerald ash borer, but you'll see a lot of these holes, or you will see a lot of woodpeckers feeding on your ash trees. Another indication that we have an infestation of emerald ash borer is something like this crack in the bark. This is the tree trying to repair itself after damage. Okay, and I'm going to go down a little bit lower. We're going to go down about another foot for our camera. Okay. And right here, you can see that the tree is putting out some small sprouts. Now, this is the tree's attempt to feed itself, because once the emerald ash borer creates those serpentine galleries, everything above that's going to die. So it's lower and lower and lower every year. It tries to put out more shoots and grow more leaves and to be able to nourish itself. Probably one of the most important indicators, that we're going to pan over here, and I'm going to have my assistants help us right here, and they're going to pull the bark away from the tree. And let's see, just rip it off there. Can you rip it off? Okay, because we're looking at the serpentine galleries. This just like takes a big hunk. Here we go. We can pull the bark right off of this tree. Okay, and can you see the galleries right here? Like here's a nice gallery right there. There's one right there. I don't know if we can see any larvae under there. Sometimes when we pull the bark off like this, we can actually see some larvae that are living down there. When this happens, this serpentine gallery that goes back and forth, everything above where the phloem and the xylem has been cut off, everything above that will die. So yeah, see, it comes off pretty easy. Look at that. Those are the serpentine galleries on the tree. So those are your basic signs that you have an infestation of emerald ash borer. So we know that this tree is so infested. I mean, there's hundreds of emerald ash borer in this tree, and it's too late for this tree, and it's going to die. But the bigger question is, what impact is this going to have on the ecosystem? In this woods here, we think about 20% of the trees in this woods are ash. So what does that mean for the bigger picture? So let's go to Jim in the woods, and he's our ecologist. We'll have him tell us about that. Say hello.
Hi, my name is Jim Steffen. I'm a senior ecologist here at the Chicago Botanic Garden. I manage about 100 acres of oak woodland here. That's my main responsibility, and I've been doing that for about 25 years. But before I talk about the emerald ash borer, I'd like to just kind of give you an idea about the some perspective on the abundance of ash trees in this part of the country. It's going to be different from one place to another, but right around the Chicago region, ash trees historically were not all that abundant in this region, and that was partly because most of the native habitats here are, at that time, were dependent on fire to keep them healthy. And ash trees are one of the species of trees that do not tolerate fire very well. So as a result, there weren't many ash trees found here like in the early 1800s when people first started moving to this area. In our 100-acre woods back in the 1830s, you might have found a couple of dozen ash trees at the most, and they were almost all white ashes. Right now we have about 4 species of ashes in our woods. But compared to the 1800s, we now have what we estimate to be about 1,300 to 1,400 ash trees on our 100 acres of oak woodland here. One of the things that's important about the loss of the ash trees is the biodiversity that they support. We know that there's probably about 280 or more species of arthropods, which would be moths, butterflies, beetles, flies, a whole host of insect species that are associated with ash trees. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to have ash trees, but you can find them on ash trees or spending at least part of their life cycle on ash trees. But of that 280 some species that we know are associated with ash trees, there's another smaller group of about 43 or 44 species of arthropods that are totally dependent on ash trees. And if they don't have ash trees, those species are likely to disappear and become extinct. And the most common ones in that group of 44 are species that are gall-forming flies. They lay their eggs on the leaves of the ash trees, and then it deforms the leaf and creates what's known as a gall. And then there are another group of those insects that are leaf-feeding insects, and they eat the actual leaves on the ash tree. And then there's another couple of smaller numbers of insects that either feed on the wood of the ash trees or will feed on the lichens that are growing on the ash trees or something like that. But those species are totally dependent on ashes and are likely to disappear. Another thing that I'm concerned about, because my job here is managing our oak woodland, is that the die-off of the ash trees is causing a lot of problems in terms of our management. One of the big issues with the die-off of the ash tree is that there's going to be a lot of dead wood, laying around in our woodland, and we do control burning as part of our management practice here to make our woodland more healthy. So having all that dead wood on the ground makes it more difficult to do our burning. We have to put those logs out if they start on fire and not let them burn. So it just creates a lot more work for us. Another problem that we have with the ash trees dying is that as these ash trees die and their roots get rotted in the ground, they'll fall over, and that can happen at any time. And if we happen to be working out in the woods, those ash trees could potentially fall on us when we're out there. So we always have to be aware of dead trees that might possibly fall down at some time, and we try to avoid working in the woods when it's really windy out. Another problem with these ash trees falling down is that when some of them are very large, they might be 70 feet tall and 2 or 3 feet in diameter, and when they come down, that's thousands of pounds of wood falling to the ground, and they may hit some of our sapling oak trees, which we're trying to encourage to grow in our woods. So they can create a lot of damage just in the act of falling down in our woodland. Ironically, one of the reasons that we have so many ash trees here now is that back in the 1800s, other invasive species were introduced to this country, in particular the disease that causes Dutch elm disease and also the blight that was killing the American chestnut tree. And when both of those species of trees were attacked by those invasive species, they died and created spaces in the woodlands, and that made an opening for the ash trees to move in. And so that's part of the reason that we have so many ash trees now, is that those other species disappeared. But as you get more and more invasive species coming into this country and eliminating tree species, you have fewer and fewer that are going to be around to be able to move in and fill the gaps that are created. Another problem that we have with our management is as our intention for a healthy oak woodland is actually to remove some of the ash trees intentionally. But with the emerald ash borer, the ashes are dying so rapidly that the canopy is opening very rapidly, and that's actually going to encourage other invasive species, things like European honeysuckle and buckthorn and garlic mustard, and some of these other species that we try to eliminate are going to do better because they're going to be getting more sunlight now that the canopy is opening up. So there's a number of ways that the structure and diversity of our woodland is being affected by this die-off. And part of it is that it's taking our time away from controlling other invasive species. So it's a serious problem for not only our woodland, but for the whole region.
Send it back to Cindy.
Back to Cindy.
We're going to wait till we got the camera. Okay, we're good. All right, so there's basically two things to be done now that we have this invasive species that is decimating our ash trees. One is to protect them from the larvae feeding on them, and the other one, as Jim was talking about, is to remove them. So here at the Botanic Garden, the first thing we did to decide what we were going to do is we made an inventory, and we counted all of our ash trees that are in the display gardens. We have about 450. So we decided that we would protect and apply a systemic insecticide and protect 87 of those trees. We selected them because of their size or their kind, or you know, for their special attributes, etc. And this is what every city or park or homeowner needs to do also, is to first inventory your trees, make a decision about whether you are going to protect and save them or they're going to have to be removed. With 8 billion trees across our nation, it is absolutely impossible to save all of them, so you do have to make decisions. So once you've decided that you're going to protect your trees, there's a couple of things that you can do. Now, on the tree that we were just working on, we're going to pretend that this would be a tree that we're going to save. And I have Mike Annis with me. He's a certified arborist. Hi, Mike.
Hi, everybody.
And a plant healthcare specialist. And he's going to tell you about the options that we have for protecting the trees from the feeding of the larvae.
Thank you. So I'm Mike, and I'm going to walk you guys through the steps of two processes, two different methods of how we treat ash trees. Like Cindy said, this is not a healthy ash tree, but we're going to pretend like it is for this demonstration. Cindy also mentioned that we're using a systemic insecticide. Systemic insecticides, regardless of method, will move throughout the whole tree. This way, in the life cycle that Tom mentioned, when those larvae are feeding, what they feed on will have a little bit of my insecticide in it, and they'll eat it and die. We want to do this before the tree is really heavily affected. The treatment is mostly effective if you can be ahead of the bugs. So we try to be ahead of the bugs here and get our treatment in when they're finding the borer within 15 miles of our location. The first method that we're going to talk about is a method that's homeowner friendly. It's a basil drench. So the first thing you want to do always is read the label. On the label you'll find instructions for rate, which is usually based on the size of the tree, the diameter of the trunk. The other thing you'll find on the label is your safety precautions. You can see I'm wearing rubber gloves, I have safety glasses, and I'm wearing long sleeves. So the next thing you're going to do, once you know your rate and you have your safety equipment, is you're going to mix your insecticide in a bucket with water very, very carefully, which I've already done, and you're going to pour slowly around the base of the tree. You're going to want to pour slow and go the whole way around. Now this treatment will be taken up through the roots, and it will move through the tree that way. The basil application has to be done once every year for the entire lifespan of the tree to keep it protected. The next method we're going to talk about is a trunk injection. The trunk injection requires me to measure the tree when I measure the tree, that'll give me how many sites I'm going to be doing my application on. I know that this is a 16-inch tree, so I have 7 sites that I'll be injecting. I've already come in and I've drilled 1 hole today. Just use a regular drill. I drilled 1 hole and I put a little plastic plug in there. You can't see it, but the plug is basically just a valve for me to put my needle in. This is the tool that I'm using. It's kind of like a syringe, almost what you'd use to get like when you get a shot at the doctor. It's kind of the same thing. So once I know my rate and I have my chemical, my insecticide in this bottle, I know that I have to put 10 milliliters in this hole. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to squeeze 2 times. I don't know if you can see it going in, but I'm going to do 1 more. And now that that insecticide is inside, it's going to move through the vascular tissue up the tree. Once it gets up there, it'll move throughout the tree, and when the larvae want to feed, they're going to be getting my chemical. This method only has to be done once every 2 years for the duration of the tree's life for full protection. Again, it's important to stay ahead of the bugs. You want to get your treatments done early. So it's important to be informed, and when you know the emerald ash borer is getting near you, to start your treatments early. Thank you.
Hey, Mike, I have a question. How many years ahead of the bugs should you be? You say 15 miles, but how many years ahead? Like 2 or 3 years? Do you think that would be good?
2 or 3 years
would be good. 2 or 3 years, actually good. So you want to make sure that the insecticide is fully throughout the tree. Okay, now the other thing that needs to be done, if we are not going to protect this tree, we know in our region, because the emerald ash borer is here and here in big numbers, that there is only one other thing that's going to happen to this tree, and that it is going to die. And as Jim was telling you, it can be very dangerous for a tree to die and that we don't remove it, because it could fall on our streets, in our parks, or in our in our home gardens. So we are going to be taking down this tree. We'll show you how that's done. So my student scientists, if you would grab your protective gear, because we're all going to use protective gear here, and I'm going to get my hard hat also. And we're going to watch the certified arborists and their crew take down this tree. We already know it's too late. This tree cannot be saved. So we're now going to cut it down and grind it up for, it'll be part of the mulch that we use here at the garden. So I'm going to move over here and let our camera pan over to the workers. Are you able to hear me? I can tell you what he's doing here. He's going to make a front cut. And that cut will be permanent. And then he's going to make a wedge. He's going to wedge out of the tree there. And it's faced away from us. Sorry, you can't see your wedge. We don't want it to fall towards them. Now, Sean is a certified arborist, trained how to use the chainsaw. This should never be done at home. You'll notice that Sean has all of his protective gear on. He has a helmet, gloves, he has eye protection, and he has ear protection. And he has on a pair of chaps that are specially made so that if the chainsaw would touch his legs, then it wouldn't immediately cut through. Look at all the sawdust there. Okay, so he's made a wedge. Now he's going to come around to the back, and he's going to make a back cut. But he's not going to cut all the way through, because if he did, we would not be able to control where the tree landed. He's going to cut most of the way through. He's going to leave some. Naturally, the tree is not going to fall on its own. The with the rope. They did a lot of prep work beforehand. This is no easy thing. Now what Sean's going to do is he's going to put some wedges in there to make sure that the tree does not fall backwards. There he is, taking the axe, putting the wedges in. Okay, he's going to cut a little bit more. Now the guy's going to pull, and let the axe pull the tree down. He doesn't want to cut all the way through. He wants that holding wood to stay there and hold it up so that it's totally controlled where the tree falls. Okay, there it goes. And you know, it's actually kind of cool and interesting to watch an arborist at work taking down the trees. But just think about this. This tree is gone, and we will never be able to enjoy its shade anymore. It's not going to be home for birds and all sorts of other critters. This is just one more tree lost in the forest.
Hi, we're back in the lab. We were all going, uh-oh, when that tree fell down. I was. Okay, so if you have ash trees in your neighborhood, what do? The ash borer is coming. I'm going to give you 3 suggestions, and then we're going to take some questions from some of you and let the experts answer those questions. So here are my 3 suggestions. Number 1, you need to make a plan. You know that there are 2 things that you can do about your ash tree. You can either cut them down after they're infested, or before the emerald ash borer gets there, you can inoculate them. Both of these things are expensive, so you have to know ahead of time that there's going to be a cost associated with your ash trees in your neighborhood. Best thing you can do is think now about what you're going to do with the ash trees that are in your neighborhood. And you might also begin to think about what kind of trees you want to replace the ash trees with. Knowing that putting all ash trees or all of any kind of tree causes problems, you might want to think about different kinds of trees. And that might be something that you want to research and tell your street planners, your city planners, what kind of trees would be good for your street. Suggestion number 2. Watch for signs of the beetle. You know what it looks like now. You know all about it. You can watch for it in your neighborhood. You can watch for the D-shaped holes. You can watch up in the canopy of the tree when the leaves start to go, where you see problems on the bark. Maybe you'll be the first person to find it in your community. And if you do, it's likely that reporters will want to talk to you. Now, it sounds like I'm saying, whoa, you'll be famous. But that's your opportunity to tell people in your community about what happens when invasive species take over. So the biggest suggestion I have for you is suggestion number 3. Be aware of the causes and the problems associated with invasive species moving into your neighborhood and do things to prevent it from happening, like don't move firewood across the state. Now we are going to move, we're going to take some questions.
We answered one question. I guess the volume didn't go out, and it was how are emerald ash borers attracted to ash trees? And really, I went over this a minute ago. We'll do it again, but it's really the ash tree puts out certain volatile chemicals that the emerald ash borer will pick up, and the ash borer will be drawn in by these chemicals that the tree produces naturally. And actually, we've taken advantage of some of these chemicals and have made some attractants with some of these chemicals, and it helps with monitoring. And I don't know if you've seen any of these really big purple monitoring stations, but they actually have some of these same volatile chemicals that the ash tree naturally produces. So it's really volatile chemicals that the emerald ash borer picks up on is what draws them into the ash trees. Okay, let's look for another question.
So questions from Arizona now.
Okay, Alex. Say hi.
Lots of hands.
Yeah, lots of hands.
What species of wasp is it that hunted the emerald ash borer? Because I know there's many different groups, like paper wasps, and because there's a lot
We're having
of
some technical difficulties here. We're not hearing you guys.
What species of wasp hunted the emerald ash borer?
What species of wasp hunted the emerald ash borer?
Okay, I am not. I can't tell you exactly what species of wasp, but there are a number of different predatory insects that are being trialed to help manage emerald ash borer, because over in its homeland, which is China, there are a number of insects that are natural predators of emerald ash borer, and there are some wasps that actually parasitize the emerald ash borer. And some of our researchers have been doing some research, and there actually have been some releases already of this. Of these insects, but there's actually some other concerns when we start bringing over other insects from another country to manage another insect. But that's really someone really bright over there who could even ask that question. So great question. But there is a lot of natural balances out there in nature, and we're looking to the homeland of the emerald ash borer to see what's been managing over there. Because like we talked about earlier, over in China, the emerald ash borer doesn't kill all the ash trees; it's killing all of ours here. So some of these predatory insects might be a way to help manage this, and there's a lot of research going on in this area currently.
Wouldn't bringing other predators from somewhere else increase?
Okay, we're going to go ahead and take a question from Virginia next. I see some hands up, guys. All right, let's just take a moment for us to get the question. Okay, you guys need to unmute. We're not getting you.
How can we know if an exotic species
could
be invasive?
How will we know if an exotic species will be invasive? That's another really good question. But basically, whenever you take an insect that has evolved in one part of the country and you bring it to another part of the country, you just don't know what the results may be. And over the years, the world has become a very small place with commerce. Things are being shipped all over the place, and it's hard to predict when a new insect that evolved in a different part of the country comes to our area, whether it's going to be a real problem or not. I think we need to be very cautious about movement of plant material or movement of anything that may bring insects along with it, because we don't have all the answers on this, and this has been happening for a long time. Japanese beetles came to the United States many years ago, and that was one of our first invasive pests. How about gypsy moth was brought over here? Actually, they thought it was going to be a positive. They wanted to make silk with it, but look what's happened with gypsy moth. So there's a lot of thought behind this, and that's actually a very good question that I think I've only half answered.
We asked if we'd like to go. Lance?
I just cut that tree down.
Okay, now we're going to go back to Chicago, nearby. So one last question, guys. Let's make it a good one. Let's give us a stumper.
Okay.
One from each. One last question from each.
Does the beetle affect the animal life in the woods?
Does the beetles affect the animal life in the woods?
Can you guys repeat your question?
Does the beetles affect the animal life in the woods?
We didn't quite hear it the first time.
Can you hear me?
We could answer that.
Does the beetle affect the animal life in the woods?
Do the beetles affect the animal life in the woods? And the answer is yes, they do. Right now, several species of woodpeckers and nuthatches.
So I think Jim in the woods is going to answer this one.
Abundance of food for them now.
Here, are they hearing you? Okay, go ahead, Jim. You start over.
The question was, are the beetles affecting the animal life in the woods? And the answer is yes, they are. Right now, about 4 or 5 species of birds, woodpeckers and nuthatches in the woods, are exploding in their populations because of all the abundance of food that they have. But other species that feed on the insects that are disappearing because the ashes are dying are probably going down in number. So they definitely are affecting the animal life.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take one more question now from Arizona.
Okay, could the beetle be trained or, in the right circumstances, change its nature to eat other trees other than ash?
Okay, the question from Arizona is, could the beetle be trained to eat other species besides ash trees?
Who wants to take that one? I guess I could.
Sure, go for it.
basically, it's very host specific, and they really only like they only prefer really just ash trees, and unlike pets and things, I don't think training a beetle would be pretty difficult. But from all we know is it's very host specific and solely only negatively affects and feeds on only ash trees. I don't think we have an insect circus or anything, but interesting question. Thanks. Okay, we're going to go to Virginia for one last question from you guys.
And then Kathy will wrap it up after this last question from Virginia.
Okay, then.
Why didn't you chop that ash tree down?
Wait.
Okay, you asked us why we chopped the ash tree down. Well, we looked at this ash tree and we determined that there was too much, it was too far gone. There was way too much emerald ash borer damage, and there was no way that this tree was going to live. So it was definitely going to die on its own. So rather than leave it to die on its own and fall, remember when Jim was telling us about all the things that could happen when a tree falls accidentally, we decided that we're going to take the trees down, especially anything that's near a road or a path. We want to take them down before they fall down on their own and hurt someone. Also, we know that by taking it down now, all the larvae that are inside the tree, when we grind this up and make wood chips, all of those larvae are going to die. So we're really happy about contributing to lowering the population of the emerald ash borers, because those borers will not grow up to fly away and lay new eggs. But mostly, we did it for safety.
Okay, Arizona, Chicago, Virginia, thank you for tuning in. This is the end of our broadcast. I want to leave you with a question, though, something that you should research. You all know Katy Perry. She recently came out with an album entitled Prism. The country of Australia banned the distribution of this album. So the question is, did they ban it because they don't like her music, or was there another reason? I'm not going to answer that for you today. I'll leave that for you to look up on your own. Now, from everyone here in Chicago, thank you. Thanks for your patience as we dealt with some technical difficulties, and we hope you've learned more about ecosystems and bringing harmony to ecosystems everywhere. Thank you.